This sutra dated back to 2,600 years ago, translated about 1,600 years ago in China from Sanskrit into Chinese. And now it's being translated into English too. The wisdom of the Buddha can be revealed just by looking at how a sutra is being expounded. These two sentences, form is none other than emptiness, and emptiness is none other than form. In philosophy, there are two ways to elucidate a concept, a philosophical concept. One is by negation, and the other is by affirmation. So you have to view a philosophical concept from both sides, from negation and from affirmation. Negation is something like, this is what you should not do. Don't do this. This is not right. It's a negative method, a negative statement. By making a negative statement, you're actually saying something positive. You should not kill. You should not lie. You should not steal. This is by negation. But on the other hand, if you look at form is emptiness and emptiness is form, it's looking at a philosophical concept from the perspective of affirmation. You are confirming it. So, in other words, when we say, don't do this, don't do that, and then on the other hand, you say, you have to do this, you have to do that. So we say, don't steal, don't be greedy. But on the other hand, it says, to give, to be compassionate, to give out, to contribute. So, in addition to being passive, don't do this and don't do that, it also suggests not just passive, actively doing something. So it is not enough just to say, I don't want to commit any errors. It's not enough just to say, in class, I want to keep silent, I want to listen, I don't want to yell out in class, I don't smoke in class, I don't put my feet on the desk in class, I don't do these things in class. But on the other hand, I become very courteous, I become very cooperative. So in other words, you are working in both ways. So you see the wisdom of how this sutra is laid out, by negation and by affirmation. When you're saying something, if you're just saying a negative statement, people may not accept you. But if you're also saying some positive statement, you're looking from both sides. So right now, what we are doing is we are saying form is none other than emptiness, and emptiness is none other than form. Actually, it means form is emptiness and emptiness is form. But then it looks at it from a negation point of view. So let's carry on with just this sentence. Form is none other than emptiness. When the Buddha talks about form, he talks about material. He talks about anything you can perceive, not just in the form of something you touch, in the form of sound too, in the form of smell too. So form embraces almost everything that your senses can contact, including objects, sound, fragrance, and so on. So form refers to all phenomena, and no other than means not different from or not apart from, but empty. Empty of what? Empty of independent existence. We have already explained. And in order to analyze form and emptiness, we look at it again from four perspectives. The first one is Dhammadhatu, conditional arising. Because when we talk about emptiness, we have to define what emptiness is. When I have a cup of water, and then I empty it out, I empty that cup, empty of what? Of water, but it still contains air. So empty of what? Empty of inherent existence. Why a certain thing has no inherent existence? Because it's all conditional arising, conditional causation. Everything is conditional causation. As I have explained, the reason why you're coming out here is because of many causes put together that lead to your presence being here. You don't come out with no reason. There are causes to everything. There's cause and effect. In order to explain this, we view it from four perspectives. There's four kinds of conditional arising. There's 4 kinds of conditional causation. Consider conditional causation from the perspective of Dhammadhatu, which is a Sanskrit word. What does it mean? It means the Dhammadhatu is the conditional cause for all phenomena, everything being dependent on everything else. Therefore, one is in all and all in one. We always listen to people saying, one is all is one, but very, very few people understand what it means. The second one is karma, conditional causation. Under the influence of karma, the condition of reincarnation arises. How come we reincarnate? Where do we come from? How come we get born? How come certain things happen? We consider from the perspective of karma. That's another perspective. The third, alaya, conditional causation. All things arise from the alaya. What is the alaya? Alaya is consciousness. There are 8 consciousnesses in us. The fourth is Tathagata Gabba, or Buddha Tata, conditional arising. What does it mean? It means all things arise from the Tathagata Gabba. All things arises from the concept of eternity. When we study, we always like to say there must be something eternal, returning to the eternity concept. So study emptiness from the perspective of eternity that people like to talk about. How come the Buddha talk about eternity and sometimes talk about impermanence? Isn't it two opposite concepts? You really have to understand it, not just getting vague ideas in your mind. And let us now explore just this, Dhammadhatu. What is Dhammadhatu? When we say empty, we say empty of what? Empty of independent existence of itself. Emptiness does not mean that we don't exist. So when we're meditating, sometimes we say, we're getting into the process of losing. Oh, poor, we're losing. In meditation, we're losing. What are you losing? You're losing your greediness. You're losing your jealousy. You're losing your hatred. You're losing your depression. You like those things. You like to acquire those things. You build up those things. Now in meditation, you're slowly, gradually losing them out, letting go of them. So you learn how to lose. Not many people learn how to lose. They only learn how to gain. They want to gain. They want to acquire more. Who would be thinking of losing things, letting go of things? That's meditation. The concept of losing. To lose, in another way, is to gain. Lose your laziness, you gain intelligence. Lose your greediness, what do you gain? You gain compassion. You gain consideration. So, empty of what? Empty of independent existence of itself. There's a sutra, Avantamsaka, talking about Dhammadhatu. The entire cosmos is in a mustard seed. Each grain of sand contains the whole world. How does this work out? It seems to be opposite. In the Chinese languages, 戒己腊须弥一沙一世界，一一围城中，果现无边刹海，刹海之中复有围城，彼围城内复有刹海，如是重重不可穷尽。I've just uttered some Chinese words. I translated that into English. In order to understand this sentence, how come the entire cosmos, the entire universe is contained in a seed? It's impossible, we said. It's impossible. And how come a grain of sand contains the whole world? How come this happened? I was educated mostly in the Western culture. And I used to read poems. And there's one poem I really like, because that poem really matches what the Buddha was talking about. Have you heard of a British poet called William Blake? Let's talk about William Blake's poem in the 1800s. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, whole infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. And some high school students scratch their head and say, what does that mean? After the teacher explained for a day, I still don't understand. How come you can see a world in a grain of sand? And how come you have heaven in a wild flower? In the palm of your hand, you can hold infinity and eternity in an hour. I don't think you will understand what it means unless you really understand what Avatamsaka Sutra says. The entire cosmos is in the seed, and a grain of sand contains the whole world. You have to understand the Buddhist teaching a little bit. So I always suggest to a teacher of English in poem, in literature, you can explain some poems without getting into Buddhist philosophy. William Blake said, to see a world in a grain of sand, that means a grain of sand contains the whole world. A grain of sand comes from rocks, right? The possibilities of that sand being formed has many, many possibilities. One of the many possibilities is it's from a cliff. And then the waves wash ashore and splash onto the rock and splash certain rocks into pieces, and that pieces get washed down to the ocean, and it accumulates in the ocean. And then as the ocean wave works in motion, it pushes and pushes and pushes it ashore and becomes a sand touchable by humans. So it could be just a stream, a waterfall, continuously bounding on certain rocks, causing little bits and pieces of rocks to be shattered and wash it to the ocean. And then you say, right, the stream, or from the ocean, the stream washes it down. And how come a stream contains water? The stream contains water because the sun shines on the water, and the water vapor gets up to the sky, and then the sky forms clouds, and the clouds come back as precipitation of this moisture. It gets condensed and heavier, it forms rain, and it drops into the stream. The stream pushes the sand down and puts it on shore and puts it to be touchable by humans. When a grain of sand is formed, what is the causation for it? The Buddha said that causation is boundless, limitless, inconceivable. You can't trace it to the beginning. What's the beginning? There's no beginning. Everything works on causation. What's the beginning? A chicken or an egg? A chicken comes first? Yeah, but chicken comes first, you start to think, a chicken comes first. Where does that chicken comes from? It's from an egg. So if there is no chicken before the egg, where does the egg come from? Can you give me an answer? Where does the chicken comes from? From the egg or the egg from the chicken? And when you draw a circle, where do you start? The point when you start drawing the circle is the point when you end the circle. So where's the beginning? What is the end? The beginning and the end is only from an illusory time concept. It's a time concept. And that time concept is because we have a concept in our mind. Who created that concept? You, me, the whole universe. Causation creates the concept. So there's no beginning and no end. So then what does the grain comes from? The grain comes from what refers to the whole world. It comes from the rain, it comes from the rock, it comes from the ocean, it comes from the water vapor, it comes from heat. How come we have rain? We have rain because we have the sun. When the sun radiates on the ocean, the heat gets into the cosmos, and then it radiates to the water, and the water gets heat, and the water vapor rises up, become clouds. And clouds fall down, become precipitation of rain. So how do you trace all these things? Everything is causation. A grain of sand contains that causation. That causation contains causation for the whole world. The fact that you are here today is causation. You could have gone elsewhere. You could have gone to jogging, but how come you're here? Because there's all kinds of causations that drives you here. So the fact that you are here is not a simple causation. It's a causation that makes that happen. How many people in Vancouver today? Oh, Many, many, many. But how come we only have a small group and not everybody comes here? Because you have that causation that makes you come here. Your car didn't broke down. You hear about that temple. You want to know something about meditation. And somehow maybe, how come I'm depressive? How come I have all these troubles in my mind? Is there any way to clear my troubles? And I click onto the computer and it says, oh, temple have meditation. Meditation helped me, so I come for meditation. A student listened to the teacher and the teacher says, you want to get an A, you got to have focus. Focus on your studies. When you want to focus, you have to build up your focus power. Where do you get your powers from? Meditation. Learn meditation. If you can learn meditation, you can get an A because you start to focus more on your studies. So there's so many reasons and so many causations. That grain of sand contains the whole world in it. It contains the 4 seasons. It contains water. It contains heat. It contains material. It contains molecules, protons, electrons, you name them. It contains everything. Every tree, for example, contains what? Contains sensations, contains conceptualizations, contains volitions, contains consciousness. Why? You know how a tree contains consciousness? Not just a tree. Say, a clap of hands. A clap of hands. One clap. What does it contain? It contains feelings. It contains conceptualizations. It contains volitions. It contains consciousness. Why? There's another Japanese poem. The master of the house, a clap of hands, very, very loud. Plop. You know what happened? What happened to the birds? The birds get scared because somebody could be shooting at them. So it's got a sensation of uneasiness to the birds. To the koi fish, it rushes to the water surface, waiting for the masters to put in feeds so that they can eat. Because that master used to be clapping hands to call the koi in the koi pond. So a clap of hands, the birds get scared, the koi gets happy. Happiness and scaring feeling. Are those sensations? Conceptualization. What happened if the master clapped the hands? The maids are preparing for the tea for the guests. Because they thought that the masters want to entertain the guests. So the maids in the house preparing tea. It's the same clap of hands, but it creates different sensations and different conceptualizations. The birds conceptualize this as an attack. The koi conceptualize it as consideration from the masters. The maid conceptualizes it as preparing tea. And what did the master conceptualize? Depends on the situation when he was clapping hands. So everything affects everything. Causation. How does it help me? You have to build conditions for causation. How does causation help a student? The student knows that he has to work hard to build up conditions to have something come true. Your whole infinity is in your hands. Your fate, your destiny is in your hand, not in God, in your own hands.